Hello and welcome back to Arsenal Analysed. But more importantly, the Premier League is back and underway. And Arsenal have managed to start the Premier League season with an all-important win. Whether or not it was easy, whether it was difficult, there are lots of questions to be answered, good and bad, of course. And myself and Neil will be covering all of the above today, including all of the bits and pieces that you've come to expect from Arsenal Analysed. But before myself and Neil give you our instant reaction to the game, more importantly, Neil, how are you doing today? And thank you very much for joining me.
I'm good, bro. Thank you so much for having me. It's good to be back on screen again.
Absolutely, yes. It's been far too long, and I'm glad that you can join me for the very first game of the season, the first of many, whether it be Premier League games, cup competitions, Europe, you name it. We'll be covering the whole lot on this channel, and for that reason, do go ahead and smash the like button if you are looking forward to today's live show, and subscribe if you're new around here and you want more of this type of content moving forward. But we haven't had long, probably around sort of 20, 30 minutes now to kind of process the game. And without getting too sort of technical with it, Neil, if you had to give me your sort of initial thoughts on the game in general, what did you make of today's opening game for Arsenal in the Premier League?
Couple testy moments, but I think it was run-of-the-mill win.
Run-of-the-mill win, yeah. And obviously, it definitely felt like a game of two halves. I suppose the first half, Arsenal felt like they were in a lot more control, a lot more of a sort of dominant sort of 35, 40 minutes outside of the first sort of opening 5-10 minutes. The Arsenal that we've seen, business as usual, should we say, that type of Arsenal. It was very, very different in the second half for one reason or another, and we'll get into it. But one thing I did want to kind of touch upon, because it's not necessarily something that we'll analyse, but plenty of clubs this season have made signings. Arsenal have made just the one at the moment. We've been linked with various people, like Mikel Moreno, for example, been linked with various different forwards. Now, Arsenal, for the first, I'd say, sort of 20 minutes or so before the second goal went in, which made things much more comfortable. And again, we'll talk about that in more depth later. Wolves really came out and came at us in the second half. And I'm not too sure whether it was a tactical thing from Arteta's point of view, where he wanted Arsenal to kind of soak it up, or whether O'Neill asked something slightly different of Arsenal in that first 15, 20 minutes of the second half. Ultimately, what I'm getting at here is effectively the same set of players in the opening game as there were in the last season. What sort of changes can Arsenal make moving forward, do you think, and how much of an impact could those changes make to Arsenal in further games to avoid that kind of repeat at the beginning of the second half?
I'm not sure if a change is needed. The reason why I say that, I feel like in looking at it, this is first game of the season, and I feel like there's a bit of, first game jitters, get that out of the way. The concentration levels are not up to match fitness yet, if you would like to say that. So, and you saw that with a little bit today with Partey. He got the ball took off of him a few times today. Well, so and it just, to me, it seems as if it was just a lapse in concentration in those moments in time. So I'm not gonna say any changes. I'm just gonna say, game by game, the focus is gonna come up to fitness levels.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that we really do need to take into consideration, is that it is the very first game of the season. Some players still probably aren't fully fit or integrated into the side, even though it's just the one signing that we've had so far. And in those sort of first few games, it can sometimes take those first few games to really kind of get up and running and into the swing of things. And I think when we look at the first half as an example, I think maybe we're all kind of false pretenses where we all maybe kind of got a bit of ahead of ourselves and thought, oh, Arsenal just turned up like they've just literally finished last season last week and then just turned up for this season, because it really did, for me at least, feel like business as usual. Same set of players. Tactically, things looked very, very, very similar from what I saw. And funnily enough, we'll use that as a bit of a transition now into the tactical side of today's show. So this is how Arsenal lined up. Obviously, on paper, we can see here on the left-hand side, Arsenal lining up in that typical 4-3-3 formation. And then when we look at the average positions of the Arsenal players, no real surprises, to be honest, from a tactical point of view. You could argue that, Zinchenko started today over the likes of Timber and Calafiori, mainly down to fitness and integration reasons. And we got a very Zinchenko-esque performance. He played left back when defending, tucked into midfield when in possession, broke the lines very effectively. Question marks over his defending still, but we know the sorts of games that he's going to play in for Arsenal. And then moving into those attacking positions, again, we know that Odegaard and Declan Rice are going to push on as those eights, and then your forwards. So I'm not too sure if there's anything that I've missed from a sort of formation point of view, if you will. Neil, I'm not sure if there was anything that you kind of noticed for Arsenal today, any sort of differences from a sort of positioning or tactical point of view.
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to mean anything, but I feel like, as I mentioned in the chat earlier, from a tactical standpoint, I feel like we're utilizing the height of the side better, at least in this game, this very first game of the season, where we've utilized the height of the side. And I feel like that's one tactical change that I saw stood out immediately. We've crossed the ball in more. There's less cutting back. There's less, looking for Odegaard at the top of the box. They went straight down. And I guess that's going to come down to the opponent that we're playing as well. So, we'll see.
Yeah, no, you do make a very good point, actually, because whether it's a new approach that Arsenal are going to take moving forward in not necessarily every single game, or whether or not it was a very specific tactic today that was implemented because we were playing against Wolves, we will find out in future weeks. But it did feel as though, especially in that first half, Arsenal seemed to pump the ball into the box a lot more. And when I say pump the ball into the box, I don't mean cutbacks, get to the byline and cut it back. We're talking good old-fashioned crosses into the box. We know the physical threat that Havertz poses because of his height as well. We know he's good in the air, and eventually he was rewarded with a goal today because of that, and we'll get into that in just a moment. But looking here, Arsenal putting 15 crosses into the box, only 3 of which were successful. So you bring up a really, really, really good point. Yes, when we compare that to Wolves' 14, does that mean it's more than the average? We'll have to wait and see. But it's definitely something that we've not seen from Arsenal, or at least noticed from Arsenal compared to last season. So it'd be really, really, really interesting in future games whether or not that's a tactic that we'll see in future games. From Wolves' point of view, in terms of how they lined up, again, no real surprises. Very much a compact sort of back 4, back 5, and then 4 or 5 in midfield, depending on the numbers. More so in that first half where Arsenal dominated, looking to kind of spring into the counter-attack. Now, in all honesty, from my point of view, in that first 5 minutes of the game, with the way Wolves set up, they really came out and at Arsenal in that first 5 minutes. I wasn't expecting it to be the first half that eventually sort of unfolded, because when looking at the way that they set up in that first half, it was very much 3 at the back, 2 in front, and 5 up top. So very similar to how Arsenal play before we forced them back, before we started to sort of dominate play. Any surprises from your side, Neil, that you noticed in the game in terms of how they set up today?
No surprises, but I did note the one thing I did note was how compact and narrow they were when they were attacking. You know,
Yes.
they seem to have some sort of well, with the integration of this new striker that they brought in, like I see where they try to utilize him, where he would actually, get the ball and try to turn and attack. So I guess that was what their game plan was, at least in the first half, because second half was a different story altogether.
Yeah, and when we look at the 2 halves, if we break them down, if I share this tab here, for example, this will show the momentum of the game. And we can see here up until half time, everything to the left is the first half. And you can see here that Arsenal was certainly far in control. You can see there are, little blips of orange here and there in that first half. They had, their opportunities on the counter attack, but it was very much an all Arsenal first half, apart from that first 5-10 minutes where, both teams were looking to settle in. And I did expect Arsenal to really kind of kick on in the second half. So for me personally, when we look at the second half, it's a lot more equal in terms of momentum. And interestingly, when we look at the stats in the second half, in terms of ball possession, Wolves did not dominate, but they had their fair share of possession and asked those questions in that first 20 minutes of the second half. So quick question for you, I suppose, here is, was there anything that you noticed in that sort of first 20 minutes before we look to analyse the goals and go through them in a little bit more detail? Was there anything that you noticed from a tactical point of view that Arsenal changed where Wolves looked to exploit it? Or do you feel that there was something that maybe Wolves changed that forced Arsenal back? Where in your opinion did that change come from? Because the momentum did change in that second half.
It did. It definitely did. And before I continue, are you guys hearing a chainsaw in the background by chance? Just wondering, because my neighbor is cutting down a tree, so I'm just wondering.
I can't hear it.
Okay,
you can't hear it, but you always get surprises. So anything to spice things up on stream.
Yeah. Hopefully it's not. Hopefully it's not Tony cutting down a tree. Big up, Tony.
Anything to get on stream.
Yeah. So let me say this.
Go on.
So with Wolves' possession in the second half, this is what I kind of thought about, because we weren't really trying to get the ball back when they had possession. We set back. We have our 2 banks of 4, and to me it feels as though, like, yes, we had moments where we were under pressure. That's going to happen when your opponent have the ball. So you have to expect that. What I do feel like is, we had a matureness in our tactics, and that's probably coming from the instruction given from Arteta. Allow them to have the ball. We know our defense is capable. We're very, very confident in our back line. When they have the ball, allow them to have the ball, allow them to attack. We have the pace to counter. And I feel that's kind of why you see that shift in possession come second half. That's been my observation.
So do you think it's more of a tactical thing from Arteta, where he feels that Arsenal are strong enough to soak the pressure up at home as well against a, with all due respect, lesser team? In the hope that maybe we can nick a goal. And it certainly did feel like that today, because we did have that sort of 15-20 minutes of pressure. Yeah. And we did manage to get that second goal around halfway through, or just over halfway through the second half. And that in itself very much changed, again, the momentum of the game. Wolves, in that 20-minute period, they did have opportunities where maybe against better teams, whether or not this would be a tactic that Arteta deploys is another question altogether. But they did have opportunities in that 20 minutes where you feel that better opposition would take those chances. Do you feel as though that there were any, and I'm not looking for scapegoats, you know, we all know that on this channel, you know, we're not the finger pointing type, but whether it be from a quality point of view where we need maybe an upgrade in the last few weeks of the window, whether it be a fitness thing, you know, were there any players that kind of stood out to you where maybe Arteta could be looking to make changes sooner? Because there were a couple of players from my point of view where I'm thinking, right, 60-minute mark now, we've been playing 15 minutes. You know, there's a few loose balls, there's a few wayward passes, and it could be fitness. You know, there's a whole number of different reasons. But, you know, what are your thoughts on some of the players in that sort of 20 minutes?
I mean, there's two players that came to mind, but I just want to roll it back a little bit. This is the first time since, I don't know, since I think we've had Partey starting in the lineup with Declan Rice and Odegaard in the midfield. So just going back to the point previously, I feel like that is where Arteta's had a boost in confidence in that we would be able to handle any pressure coming on. In saying that, the two players that stood out for me that I felt like, okay, at the 63rd minute mark, okay, it's time to make some changes, were Thomas Partey and Zinchenko. I feel like those were the two players that had their a moment or two in lapses of concentration where, okay, a loose pass here, a bad pass here, a back pass instead of a forward pass, that started happening. So, and then we waited, I guess, when was the first substitution? In the 70th minute? That brought on Vieira, brought on Timber for Zinchenko, and then, you know, so first game of the season, I don't want to go in too much, but those are the two players that really kind of stood out for me when it's time for substitutions to be made.
Yeah, and for me, I have to agree. Those are the two players that stood out for me as well. The only other player that really kind of stood out was Martinelli. You know, I'm really hoping that he kicks on this season. You know, we know what we get with Trossard, and maybe that sub could have been made a little sooner. But at the same time, maybe Arteta wants to give Martinelli a bit more confidence and a bit more belief by keeping him on, because we all know the quality he brings. We all know the potential that he's got. And it only takes, you know, a couple of games for him to get a goal or an assist. And all of a sudden, you know, we've got the Martinelli from a couple of seasons ago, you know, 15 goals in the Premier League. You know, if we can get that Martinelli back this season, then, you know, boy, we've got a hell of a player on our hands. But I think, and it's probably a bit of an obvious question and a bit of an obvious answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. With regards to Thomas Partey, there's question marks whether or not we'll bring a replacement in, because there's Moreno who we're being linked with. And then we've obviously brought in Calafiori and Timber, which, although he's been at the club for a year, is pretty much a new signing because we haven't been able to play him. But can you see why Arteta are bringing those players in to maybe play ahead of the likes of Zinchenko, and why we're being linked with the likes of Moreno to play alongside, you know, your Rices and Odegaards? Can you see why Arsenal are doing these things?
Yeah, I feel like, you know, I don't want to say it's super obvious, and this is why. We know what Zinchenko brings to the table. Yeah. Right? Tucks in attack, or, you know, goes to left back in defense. But when he tucks in and we're in attack, we get very fluid movement of the ball in that respect. We could say, okay, with Calafiori, we're probably going to get that, but we can't. We haven't seen him kick a ball yet in this season. So, you know, he could come in and, God forbid, it's a shit show. And, you know, before you know it, the whole fan base is crying out for Zinchenko to come back into the team. You know, when it comes to Thomas Partey, my issue with Partey has always just been his fitness level. It's not his football
consistency
capability.
and fitness.
Yeah. So his fitness level is my concern, and I've been saying it since last season. If you can't play for the entire season, or at least 60% of the season, I don't know. I feel like you need to have a really solid, at least have him as our backup and have someone come in front of him and start.
Yeah, I agree completely. From a Premier League point of view, you want him to be able to start at least 30 games. 30 of the 38 games, and then that's why you've got your other players as squad depth, like your Jorginhos and whoever else. I completely agree, and it's a real shame because when Partey is in full flow, and we have seen him in full flow, the quality is there. We know what he brings. It's just a real shame that, as you say, injuries have stopped him playing, 8-10 games in a row consistently, where he's going to bring that quality and show people that quality. And hence why we're being linked with the players that we're being linked with. So certainly food for thought. Having kind of broke things down at, I suppose, a slightly more kind of basic level than we used to on this channel, easing ourselves back in nice as we've had a good break for about 4 months. But I suppose another good place to go to next is the very first goal, and I suppose touching on your point earlier, really, with regards to the crossing, with regards to the physicality and use of Kai Havertz. We can see here the ball is deep in midfield. I think this is Zinchenko. If we move it on a little bit, we can see that out here on the right-hand side, eventually it is Bukayo Saka that picks up the ball. And I think it's more a case of, we look at the position he takes up just here as he hits it. And it's really difficult for defenders to defend against these types of crosses when they're put in with the quality that Bukayo Saka eventually puts the ball in, sort of in between the sort of 6-yard box and penalty spot, if you will. And then Kai Havertz using his physicality and height to get between the two defenders and nod the ball home. If we look here, he gets in between the two defenders nicely and before the goalkeeper gets here. What were your thoughts on this goal? Was it sort of rewards where they were due?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I feel like we were knocking on the door at that point in time. And it came to a surprise. The type of goal was very shocking to me. I was like, wow, what was that? What is this about? Because usually Saka has the ball in that position. He goes into the 18-yard box, cuts back, and then looks to cut inside. So seeing this was very refreshing, because I've been saying, Saka needs to add something to his game. He can't keep going with this one trick wonder kind of thing, drives into the 18-yard, cuts back, because everyone's going to pick up on it. So I was actually very, very happy to see this from him, because it was a quality ball too. No one's going to defend that.
No, absolutely. And I do agree with you, actually, because normally you see Bukayo Saka get to the byline, or maybe you've got an Odegaard or a Ben White going on the overlap for the cutback. And I think a lot of last season, where Havertz was still new and building confidence, which did take a few months, we had Jesus up top before he got injured, and he's not going to win the types of battles that you can see here on screen now that Kai Havertz is going to win. And I think the beauty of what you've got here is that if Arsenal do need to get to the byline and cut it back, you do have the likes of Rice, Partey, Odegaard on the edge of the box will have that shot. But then at the same time, if that's not on, you get that unexpected cross. And a lot of teams, probably today, Wolves included, were a little bit surprised at how many balls we were putting into the box. Not because Arsenal don't have the quality, because we know, as we said earlier on, Kai Havertz is physical, he's tall, he's good in the air. But I think it's not the sort of football that you typically associate with Arsenal. So it's nice to see that, every season, I know it's only the first game, but every season it seems as though that Arsenal are looking to just add a little bit more just to ask a different question of the teams that we're facing. And we'll move very quickly on to the second goal. And this was, as we said earlier on, after 15, 20 minutes of pressure, chances for Wolves. You know, there were parts of me thinking, are we going to concede here? Are we going to regret not taking some of those chances, you know, in the first half? Why hasn't Arteta made substitutes earlier? The typical emotional roller coaster ride that Arsenal put us through. Day one, we've got 38 more of these to come. So an early free kick is taken here, Neil. Do you want to talk us through this one?
So this was the save, right? Or this was
the second goal from Saka. Okay. So the early free kick was taken to Kai Havertz here, as you can see on screen.
So Kai Havertz takes it up, leads it up from midfield, lays it off to Bukayo Saka. So right here. Stop right here. This is the contrast that I'm talking about. Saka has, in this game, added something to his approach and is giving defenders something to think about. Oh shit, is he going to cross? Is he going to take it on? What is he going to do? And in this case, he took it on and took it on extremely well. Just class. Look at that. Boom. There's no, a couple players in between, there's in the goalkeeper's line of sight, which obviously, delayed his reaction, because it was a delayed reaction that, that caused the ball to go in the back of the net. So, yeah, I'm super happy. This was, in hindsight, you look at it and it's like, yeah, this is something I want to see more of, as this season develops. So we'll see, man. It's a long season ahead. So it was a good game, though. Absolutely good game.
It was a good game, and it's kind of it's one of those, isn't it, where what we've come to expect from Arsenal based on the last few years. I suppose that I don't know if it's the right words necessarily to use, but when Arsenal had the first half that we had, where we could have easily have been 2 or 3-0 up, you expect Arsenal to kick on in the second half then and offer more of the same, based on the first half, based on last season and the season before, and you get a little bit greedy with it, I suppose, where you're kind of like, why is it not happening? Why aren't we 2, 3, 4-0 up? And I think we also need to understand, and you touched on it earlier perfectly, we have to appreciate that this is the first game of the season. There are some players that are still not necessarily fully fit. There are some players that started today that towards the back end of next season didn't feature because they were either out of favour or unfit, in the likes of Martinelli, Partey and Zinchenko, who have been reintegrated into the side. And we do have other players to, again, come into the team as well. So maybe our expectations need to be in the right place for us to build momentum moving forwards. And we will see that fluidity and that beautiful attacking play that we're used to when things are, I suppose, further along. Probably 2 or 3 more games along the way where we've got Spurs and City away after the international break. So they're going to be interesting shows when we do them. But just quickly, before I move on to an incident in the game, I want to grab your opinion on it. I'd love to hear anyone's thoughts in the chat as well. But for you, how important, and I know we've already kind of touched on it, and I don't want to feel like we're going on about it too much, but how important for you was it that the second goal came at the stage that it did? We can see here, we're on the 73rd minute. You're looking at 15, 20 minutes of pressure from Wolves where, they could have scored goals and the game could have finished very, very differently. How important was that for the narrative of the game?
Absolutely. This was the nail in the coffin, in my opinion, because the pressure that Wolves were applying at that point in time, it said that, a goal from them could come at any moment in time. So, when Saka did score this goal, it kind of did release the pressure, but also it took the wind out of their sails.
Absolutely.
So it couldn't come at a better time. I mean, if it did come any later, then it would have been like, okay, it's done and dusted for them. There's still 17 minutes of game time here, or regular clock game time, for them to come back with something. But the way that they were pressuring us, it came perfectly. Couldn't come at a better time.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, because you just felt like they were edging ever closer, and as you
Emirates
say,
was quiet. Everyone was on the edge of their seats.
You could sense that nervousness
around
from the crowd. It was. The crowd in the first half were great. The Emirates that we've come to know over the last few years.
I was feeling it all the way here in South Florida, and that's all the way there in England, in London. So I was feeling it. So it couldn't come at a better time.
Yeah, it was at a good time, because, like you say, it knocked the wind out of their sails, and all that effort that they'd been putting in, their reward was that they'd conceded a goal from all the pressure that they'd piled on to Arsenal. And for the, I know they walked away with nothing today, but if Wolves play that sort of football that they did in that 20-minute period in other games this season, they will be rewarded, and I think they'll be absolutely fine. But the incident that I wanted to grab your thoughts on, I have had a quick look on social media, and it has split opinion. Some people are saying that, absolutely fine, no need to kind of look into it any more than it was kind of looked into. Other people are saying that you can clearly see half a reaction, if you want to call it that. I don't know if that's the best way to describe it. You can see that he kind of pulls himself away from reacting anymore, which probably would have resulted in an absolute 100% red card. But it's very kind of 50-50 split from what I've seen. So I'll sort of play through the incident here. Havertz commits the foul. The referee blows up. And then afterwards, there's a bit of a tumble. And I think where people are questioning it more so than it not being a red card is that he has the opportunity to fall to the side of Kai Havertz. And you can see here that he's clearly looking at Havertz, puts his arm around his throat. And it's here where he's like, probably shouldn't do anything else. I'm gonna get into trouble if this goes any further. Does the sensible thing and kind of falls to the side, putting his hand up in the process. I think he kind of halfway through doing it, he kind of realizes that, oh shit, VAR is a thing. Maybe I shouldn't be doing what I'm doing. So, what are your thoughts on
this? This was I mean, while it was like Kai Havertz clearly aggravated the reaction, but that doesn't give justice to like that right there. You're coming down with your weight, your body weight, and you're reaching for his neck, and then at the very last minute, I think his hand was on his neck for a point in time, maybe a second or two, and then he shifted his hand to the shoulder, because you realize, oh shucks, because like right here, right there, that is what does your hand do? You could choose to put your hand somewhere else. So in my opinion, that's a red card. There's no halfness. There's no nothing. We've seen players gone off for way less. That to me is a pure reaction from the Wolves player grabbing the neck of Kai Havertz with all his weight coming down to his neck. He could have snapped the man's windpipe.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Judge suggesting similar to yourself as well. I'm really split on it, to be honest with you. I don't know which way to look at it. A lot of people, like I say, it's very kind of 50-50 from what I've seen on social media.
There's another view of this, by the way. There's another view of it, of actually to the side, like right. You're seeing the man's hand and his thumb on the neck of Kai Havertz. Like In my
I do
opinion,
agree. Actually, this doesn't necessarily. This only gives you one.
that's one point of view.
Yeah, one angle as such.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose what it comes down to as well is obviously the referee didn't see it in
Mm-hmm.
real time, and again, it comes down to the opinion then of VAR and who's on VAR. And I think what the only way I can see that this hasn't been reviewed not properly, where the referee hasn't been asked to go over and have a look at it necessarily, is that they're like, right, look, they're 1-0 down, first game of the season, benefit of the doubt. Let's not make it any controversial decisions. Because I don't think this is something that's not me agreeing with the decision. But I think it's like, right, first game of the season. It's not massively controversial. Do we want to put VAR in the headlines first game of the season? These are the sorts of things I can imagine are going through the head of some of the officials. Whether or not that's the right way to look at it or not, I don't know. What do you think?
For me, this is what this is how I look at it. I look at it in the frames. Okay, they tussle. That's part of the game. Players aggravate each other. Yeah, that's kind of part of the game too. But as they come down, he could have gone back, all the way back from this position. He could have gone, but he reached down. He reached. He was the one who did this and was going for Kai Havertz, who was already on the floor. He chose to do that.
Like a natural.
It wasn't a natural, yeah. So look at his body here. Like, he intentionally went in that direction. So I feel like, you know what? I guess this is me carrying a bag of things that's gone against Arsenal for quite many years, especially since VAR has been involved. But in my opinion, like, the player had no good intentions here. He should have been sent off.
Yeah, it's also one of those ones as well where I think that if, for example, Arsenal would have gone on to draw or lose the game, or if Arsenal would have gone on to draw the game and the Wolves player involved here had an influence in the goal, whether it be like, him scoring the goal or assisting the goal or having some sort of hand to play in Wolves' equaliser after this incident, I think this particular incident would have been blown up way bigger than it is. But because Arsenal have walked away with the 3 points, a clean sheet, perfect kind of opening to the season, it probably isn't going to get looked at as much as other incidents. But we'll have to wait and see. VAR probably won't get talked about from an Arsenal Wolves point of view this weekend. But it's a long season, so plenty of time to go. And I think before we view and talk about any kind of players today in terms of the good and the bad and why someone stood out, we have to give a massive shout out, I think, to a certain William Saliba, who has officially become the fastest Arsenal player in the history of the club to get to 50 wins. He did it in 66 appearances.
Really?
So he's officially the fastest player to get to 50 wins of any Arsenal player in the history of the club. He done it in 66 appearances, previously held by Monreal, Kolo Touré, Edu and Sol Campbell, as you can see there. And the other 16 games, as you can see on screen, resulted in 8 draws and 8 losses. So another achievement to add to his ever-growing stature as a player. So I'm sure there'll be many more to come as the weeks, months and seasons go on. Now, I haven't checked on Twitter yet to see who the 3 or 4 players are up for the Man of the Match award. I'll quickly have a look now, and I'm sure that they're probably already online. Not that that's going to influence who me and you talk about,
Right.
I can't see anything yet, but we'll talk about 3 or 4. We'll go through the whole 11. We'll talk about 3 or 4 players here today, whether or not they were kind of influential. Maybe they need to step up. Maybe not necessarily the best time to talk about players needing to step up, as we've kind of already alluded to today, haven't we? That, you know, it's early doors. Maybe we get off the back of a few players and give them an opportunity to, you know, find their feet for the season. But over to you first. Are there any? Who is the first player that you think we should be talking about today, and why?
First player I think we should be talking about is not a part of the 10 players that's in the outfield. It's David Raya. David Raya should get the new. He should now own the label of Hand of God, because that save was heard
in the first half.
My word, the ball coming off of that glove was like, oh my! You know that was going in the back of the net, and I didn't expect him to save that. I was saying, oh God, well, we're looking at a 1-1 now. And boom, off the glove. I was like, shut. What is going on here? That was
just for you.
Yes, look at that. Boom. Like, he had really good connection on that header, and it was like, and then the reaction to get up and still secure the ball.
What you can't see in this video, which is really unfortunate, I haven't checked before today's show, but what you don't see in this video is David Raya is actually moving in this direction. I don't know if you can see my mouse on screen now. He's actually moving towards this way. He's moving that way. Yeah, he's moving to his left. Yeah. And then obviously the ball goes to his right. So he's having to basically, force himself against the motion of direction that he's moving in.
Physics.
From a header that's literally been hit at pace. It's such a reactionary, instinctual save. Yeah. But yeah, I completely agree with what you say here. Let's have a look at some of his stats today. I always find it really difficult looking at goalkeeper stats because they don't necessarily always tell the full story, do they?
Yeah, they don't. They really don't. I feel like if you have to rate a goalkeeper, yes, you get a lot of information from the statistics, but like when you look at the goalkeeping and you look at the involvement and how many saves and the types of saves, and then putting the ball back into play and how quickly and what effect it had on the game. Like, those are the statistics that comes from the eyes. Like, you can't beat that. The good old eye test, you know. And it was a good, really good first performance, first game of the season, sensational.
Yeah, again, just reinforcing why Arteta has decided to change goalkeepers. I think that debate has been long buried now, but when you see rumours of Ramsdale sort of moving on and that kind of thing, and you see the sort of saves that Raya is making today, those arguments are long of the past now. And you make a very, very good point, because all good teams need to have a really good defensive unit. So yeah, absolutely spot on. I think the obvious next player, I'll pick the next one. We'll go one for one. We'll do 4 in total. The obvious next one for me is Kai Havertz. And the reason why I wanted to talk about him is last season he came to Arsenal with very kind of low confidence, and he grew into this side. And then when Jesus got injured, he was the obvious choice to play up top for Arsenal. However, this season, Jesus and Kai Havertz have both been fit during pre-season. They've both looked very, very good. We do know that Kai Havertz can play in midfield as well, as an 8 alongside Odegaard, with Rice playing a little bit deeper. That was one of the things that went through my head this morning. You know, is that what Arteta is going to go with today and play Jesus up top? But he's opted to go with Kai Havertz, which was my prediction in the end. he's been rewarded with a goal and an assist, continuing that form on, confirming to everyone why he should be starting up top for Arsenal. What did you make of his performance today? How important is he going to be for Arsenal this season?
Yeah, well, I mean, if in transition from Raya, that he would have been my next player to go on to. Like, he had a very solid performance in an assist and a goal, which is good for him. It's good for his confidence. And as you rightly said, he came to the club last season not just low on confidence for himself, but you had an entire fan base, including myself, with massive question marks over the signing. You know, there was a ton of like the expectation was he's going to be like a Willian and like that type of signing that is just not going to hit the ground running. And he ended up having one of the best seasons he's ever had since moving to the Prem.
Yeah.
And then, kicking off this season with a goal and assist can only do him more good. I also want to add to this. I saw an emotional side of his game today,
right,
which you very rarely see, because he seems very nonchalant, when he plays. But now you're seeing him, arguing back with the referee, players that he's getting in the rough with defenders. Like, you're seeing that in his game now. So I'm saying, okay, all right. So, all right, Kai, let's see how you progress on to the rest of the season. I'm looking forward to seeing more of that, and hopefully more goals. Let's see how it unfolds for him.
Yeah, I think it's not pressure that he's necessarily inviting. The same with Jesus as well. But if Arsenal don't sign a forward between now and the end of the season, it'd be really, really interesting to see what sort of numbers he and Jesus put up between now and January, because that will be the next sort of natural time that people start to ask that question again around, are Arsenal going to bring a forward in January, especially if we're in and amongst that kind of title challenge again, which everyone expects us to be. If we're kind of a little off the pace, or people feel like we're not scoring enough goals, those are the sorts of questions. But today's performance, it definitely gives me the confidence that he's going to score the goals. I don't think he's ever going to be a 25 plus goal a season type of guy. I think he'd probably be in around a sort of maybe 15 mark potentially. But let's wait and see. But yeah, over to you on player number 3. Who else would you like to talk about today?
It's gonna be Bukayo. I started with him earlier. I'm gonna finish with him today. Adding the crossing part of his game, which he's never been really known for. That was more of a Martinelli type of role.
Yeah.
Seeing him do that and rewarded with an assist gives me a lot more excitement to watch him play, in every game, because now I'm gonna see, okay, maybe he's adding that, but maybe he's gonna add something else. So I want to see what is he adding to his game in every single game. I mean, him scoring is like, okay, that's something that's you expect that from him. He's Arsenal's star boy. He's the poster boy of the club.
Yeah.
So him scoring, okay, I get that. But what else does he do? Other than cut back on the left foot, cut inside. Like, we want to see more from him. So, and I'm saying I mean the fan base, and that's what makes players go on to be all-time greats, get a statue outside the stadium. You constantly add to your game. You constantly learn from players of the past and what they did and how they reinvented their game in every match. So yeah, man, big up to Bukayo Saka, man, star boy.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to see how he kicks on this season as well, because since breaking into the first team, he's learned, he's got bigger, he's got better, he's taken that responsibility on as a player, and he had close to or around the 30 plus goal involvements last year. I think it was just over 30 goal involvements across all competitions. So it'd be really interesting to see how he progresses from here, and whether or not Arsenal add competition in that area for him as well. Is it a good thing if Arsenal do add competition from 2 points of view? We can rotate him in and out of the side to keep him more fresh in cup competitions that don't mean as much, against like lesser oppositions and that kind of thing. Or is someone of a slightly lower quality going to push him more and provide that competition to be like, right, I need to make sure I'm constantly on my game. Not that he hasn't been, but you kind of have that kind of, when you're kind of looking over your shoulder, like, right, I need to make sure I'm 2 steps ahead of the other guy. So, really, really, really interesting questions that will get answered in around 8 or 9 months from now. We will see. But I am very, very confident. The final player that I want to talk about, to be honest with you, I wasn't planning on talking about him, but Thomas Partey here, who in the second half, for me, his performance dropped slightly in terms of his passing. There are a few wayward passes. I know that it says here that he's got an 89% passing accuracy, which is fantastic, and 4 key passes. You wouldn't question it. If you were someone who didn't watch the game and you saw that, you'd be like, brilliant. And again, you come here to the bottom and you see that he's won, 6 ground duels, 3 tackles, 3 clearances, really kind of solid player at the base of your midfield, protecting that back 4. And to be on an equal footing with Declan Rice, who's been transformative for Arsenal and better than Odegaard, is huge. So do you think that maybe, because I'm not saying that I thought he played awful, but he didn't play amazing either, in my opinion. Do you think we might have overlooked it slightly in terms of his performance today?
This is what I think. I think what happens is the judgment comes from the point in time the lapse happens, or the bad pass happens, and what comes from the bad pass. As you said, if you look at this, not looking at if you didn't see the match and you just look at the statistics, you're going to say, oh, this guy had a fantastic game. But the feeling you got when he lost the ball and what almost happened is what gives us the kind of judgment that, oh, shucks, that kind of stands out. And what happens? The negative stuff kind of floats to the top, and the positive stuff kind of, goes down a little bit. Whatever good stuff he did in the game, it kind of takes a back seat. So, overall, he had a decent enough game. It's just those moments when he lost the ball. For instance, when Jurgen Timber made that nice, smooth, like he's skating on glass move, and then the ball got took away, and then it almost went into the back of the net. That's the moment that stood out for me more than the making those 2 players look like dummies, just passing by them. So it's first game of the season, bro. Long days ahead.
It's clear to see that Thomas Partey is going to stay now for the season, unless something crazy happens. His contract's up at the end of the season. If he can stay fit and offer some consistency, whether or not we sign Moreno or not, I think we probably will. It certainly provides great cover and great competition at the base of our midfield. And if we can have the Thomas Partey that we've seen in the past, when we've seen performances against the likes of Man City, for example, then I'm all for it. Performances like the one he put in today in the first half, where sometimes, like you say, you make those sideways passes, you make those transitional passes where you play that ball probably a little bit sooner than someone like Declan Rice. And it goes a little bit unnoticed and a little bit under the radar because you just kind of expect it from him. If we can get that Thomas Partey back into the Arsenal team for this season, similarly to the likes of City when they get injuries and suspensions, you've got that, you've got that quality player there who can step in and do a job, then I'm absolutely all for it. But we have to give him the benefit of the doubt, I suppose. Like you said, right back at the very beginning of the show, it is the first game of the season. We do need to temper our expectations to a degree. because there are going to be some players like Thomas Partey, like Zinchenko, who are probably going to need a little bit more time to get their fitness back. And they are probably looking over their shoulder a little bit because they know that there are other players that might be more in favour. So I suppose, man. Sorry, go on.
I was just gonna say, even if we do sign Moreno, which I think is gonna happen, it's just a matter of time. And I do think we are going to sign one more player after him.
Same.
Even with all of that and what we have, we are going to lose a game that we're expected to win. That's just my belief. This is just how the game goes. And yeah, you're very right in what you said. We have to temper our expectations. It is the first game of the season, yes. In my opinion, Thomas Partey has been out of playing first team football for a very long time. So I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and say, you know what? He's just warming up. Concentrations levels are going to come up to match fitness, and he's going to flourish. Now, if he's our backup choice and Moreno comes in and he's the first choice, then what a backup option. That is a sensational backup option to have.
Similarly to how Jorginho came in.
Yeah, exactly. And let me tell you something. Jorginho is one of my favorite players at the club. I always, even when he was at Chelsea, I said, man, he would be such a good player for Arsenal because he does the fundamentals right. And I don't want to go off on a tangent here, but he does the fundamental things so good, and that's why we, Mikel went after him and got him when he did. So we'll see, man. We'll see.
It's the start of a very long an emotional season, no doubt, whether it's the Premier League, the Champions League, or one of the various domestic cup competitions.
Cups. Yeah, I have one more thing I want to add.
Sure.
And that is, let us give Mikel Arteta his flowers for this substitution he made when he brought in Trossard, moving Martinelli over to the right-hand side and taking Bukayo Saka off. That is so important to two players. One, Bukayo Saka, because he's just been playing football all over the world.
Non-stop.
And then two, Martinelli, who he now recognizes, okay, I need to give this guy more game time and I need to give him the opportunity to play in different areas to see how he can build his confidence. So, big up to Arteta for that, because I think it's important. He's now thinking about the players the way I think he, as he matures as a coach and a manager.
I completely agree, and it kind of goes back to what I mentioned earlier on, is that you can see that Arteta wants to give certain players that level of confidence. And Martinelli is one of those players, because we know what he's capable of. It was only the year before last where he scored 15 goals in the Premier League. There's a player there. And the potential of that player is huge. And I really do hope he kicks on this season, because Trossard is now getting on, not getting on in terms of like 35, 36 or anything like that, but you would probably think that he's got maybe a season or two left at Arsenal. And what you would want is someone like Martinelli to naturally step in, which we all thought he would do off the back of that season he had a couple of seasons ago. And that player still is in there somewhere. So, a nice way to end today's show. The first of many shows of the season, as I've already alluded to. 38 Premier League games, plus the new format for the Champions League and domestic cup competitions. Hopefully, you'll be joining us at the end of the season when we celebrate with some silverware. That would be ideal, but we'll have to wait and see. Neil, thank you very much for joining me today. Any final thoughts?
No, man, I just thank you again for having me on. It's really good to be back on screen with yourself, and hopefully we can get Keith and Tony on here as well, and
absolutely
get the band back together and win a few Grammys.
That would be absolutely lovely, and I'm sure the rest of the gang will join us at some point, whether it's just a duo on screen or a quartet. We'll have to wait and see. If you have enjoyed today's show, do go ahead and hit that like button. Subscribe if you're new around here to make sure you don't miss any future shows. And if you want to be on time in the next show, get that notification bell on as well, so you know that we are live next time around, which will be next weekend. But for now, thank you very much for joining us. Have a good rest of your day. And as always, come on, you Gunners. Take care. Stay safe.